It's like just as soon as I thought I had it figured out, like we had a sleep schedule and I knew how they were doing, it's like all of a sudden next week would change, right? All of a sudden we're on a new thing. And now I'm like, oh, now I got to learn this all over again.
Kids are a great study. I always used to say, if something bothers you, just give it 2 weeks. It'll change. But this leads into the survey had 5 hardships.
Welcome to Endless Coffee Cup, a regular discussion of marketing news, culture, and media for our complex digital lifestyle. Join Matt Bailey as he engages in conversation to find insights beyond the latest headlines and deeper understanding for those involved in marketing. Grab a cup of coffee, have a seat, and thanks for joining.
Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Endless Coffee Cup podcast. I'm your host, Matt Bailey, and with me, a former guest on a number of appearances, Mary Czarnecki. Mary, how are you doing today?
Good. So happy to be back, Matt. Thanks for having me as a guest again.
Absolutely. I think last time we talked about entrepreneurship and, we've talked about some customer journey. And I think over the summer, maybe it was over the summer, the 2023 Social Media Career Report was published by Hootsuite. And immediately I thought, I got to talk to Mary about this. You are in the field. You are, like me, you are actively out and training companies. You are getting a firsthand look. And I think it's interesting, like you and I doing training, we get the outsider perspective and we get to go into an organization. And I like to joke, and we get to see all the problems that we don't have to deal with. So it's always an interesting view. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it is interesting because I know both of us do a mix of consulting as well as speaking and training. And it is interesting because when I go in as a trainer and it's just a one kind of gig, you start to see some of those problems. You almost want to say, we should talk more about this. But,
yes.
It's not always either an option or maybe there's other priorities, right? But I guess that's the thing that's so interesting too, because being able to kind of get those little windows into so many different organizations and different teams, you do see pretty stark differences between organizations, but then you also start to see some of those commonalities, which I think is even more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always fascinating to and even get some conversations that are going on within the organization. And like you said, it's that we should talk a little bit more because I think there are times when I've gone in and I feel like we're training, but we're training for a specific problem, but there's a deeper issue going on. And this training might just glance off. It might solve something, but you've got deeper systemic problems that are going to affect this training and the outcome of the training.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges I see as a consultant and trainer is that so often, even when organizations do invest in training, which in this day and age, is not a given, a lot of learning and development departments are being either downsized or limited or budgets cut. And, teams of downsized, which means each individual marketing professional has more on their plate, which means sense of urgency, which means less time for personal development and learning. So, I think I'm interested in watching is how when people do commit the time to training or to development, those organizations that really actually enable them to spend the time in the training, as opposed to the teams that, there are organizations and say, okay, we're going to do the training and we're going to make it required. But then they don't actually give their employees space. They don't actually give them the ability to focus on the training for an hour, 2 hours, or even 3 hours, right? So I've been in trainings before where, even the managers on the training with the reportees are emailing them during the training.
Right. Yes.
So
I don't mind it happening when like we're in the middle of an activity and they're getting ideas. I think that's cool. But when they can't leave each other alone about normal business stuff and, how's this going? Give me a status. And it's like, you're in training. Leave this stuff behind. What is going on?
Well, because I think it's like anything when it comes to dividing our attention these days, right? I know there's the switching cost a lot of people talk about, where even if it's just your phone, your watch beeping, the couple seconds it takes to switch your attention is the exact same as, looking at something else for 10 minutes and then coming back. Your brain doesn't know the difference. And so enabling the team not only to have access to learning and development and training, but actually giving them intentional permission, right? I've also seen those teams and those business leaders that have said, look, they do I'll do my intro, but they'll actually get on even before that and say, I mean it when I say shut everything else down. I mean it when I say, listen to Mary. She's got some things that we can actually use and apply. But if you don't take the time today to actually learn, and not just learn, but actually break it, play with it. Let's learn from her. Let's look at the examples, but then let's try to apply it, because all of a sudden when you start to apply it, even if it made sense when she said it, when you try to do it for yourself, sometimes it doesn't work quite well the first time. You gotta ask some questions, or, I thought that made sense, but actually, if you're not paying attention, you don't have the opportunity to ask things like that.
Absolutely. And what I love about that is, when you're breaking out into activities, when they're now putting it into practice, I love it when there is that serendipitous moment of everyone's come together, they've left their phones behind. And one of the things I do is I try to make all my activities independent of any device. We're going to do it on whiteboard with markers so that we can leave the laptops and the phones behind and everyone uses that. But when they start working together and trying to solve an internal problem, trying to improve a process, and that's when you see the excitement. That's when you see now they're on board. Now and when they actually start to solve internal issues or come up with new ideas, either for a product or a service or something that they can offer, that's just fantastic. I absolutely love those moments because it's like, okay, everyone's on board. They're seeing the benefit for it. And I feel like as a trainer, I can sit down because they're teaching themselves, they're taking it to the next step. And at that point, I can only coach a little bit because they're the experts in their business and they're making it happen.
No, 100%. Yeah. And I know, for me, that's why I like doing both. I mean, I've got the opportunity to do training workshops, but actually what I've had a lot more fun with, especially for teams that don't work together physically every day. I've found that those teams, I'm actually also doing more of the facilitation workshops where I'm not actually doing a lot of training or teaching. It's actually just holding space for them to actually talk to each other, right? And to actually share ideas and build off each other. Because I think especially one of the big challenges I'm seeing with hybrid and distributed teams is you miss that opportunity for creativity, right? You miss that opportunity to just hear someone, not that's talking to you, but that is talking to someone even across the pod, right? And you hear something, and just because you heard that, it can influence what you're doing, the way you're thinking about it. And we've missed that opportunity when we're not in a same physical space.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. We could go all day on that. Wow. Yeah. And it's funny, you see articles about work from home and space, but there is an advantage to working with a team. Now, granted, I don't think it has to happen every day, but when you're with other people, you're exposed, like you said, just something someone else says in a different conversation, being able to just talk to people. And there is so much more information that is passed face to face than through an email or a text or a Slack chat or anything like that. So there is value to that. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about training in person is, you and I could go on about the difference between training on Zoom and training in person. There is a distinct difference in the two. But when you do get people together, there is a lot of shared experiences that they can pull from it. And it's like they're more willing to talk about them.
Agreed. Totally.
So that I think is like a great segue into this social. So I titled this so far. I don't know if this is going to be the right title, but I'm going to call it social anxiety because it's all about Hootsuite did this career report. They surveyed almost 4,000 social media marketers. And that I was like, okay, we've got a good size. That's a good size. Couple things about this just to kind of set the stage. So almost 4,000 respondents, 48% have been a social media marketer for 4 years or less. That jumped out to me very much so. And just under 20, about 17% have been a social media marketer for 10 years or more. That jumped out to me. Like, that's a significant number. Okay. Next number that jumped out to me, 77% are happy. I thought that was just an interesting stat to throw into the report. I thought that was, 3 out of 4 are happy social media marketers. Why is that? Why do you think social media marketers are happy, Mary?
Well, it's interesting because I think it's not a role, at least in my experience, the exposure I've had, it's not a role that people typically like fall into. It's a little more intentional, I think, than other areas of marketing and communications. And so I'm wondering if that's part of the contribution, is that, okay, this is actually something that it's not just that I'm good at it and therefore I end up, that's the end of way my career went, but almost I've intentionally chosen to pursue this path. So maybe that's why they have a higher, rate of happiness.
If you asked me a while ago, maybe a couple years ago, I would have said it's because your job to be on social media. I think of the days where you'd be in trouble if you were on social media at work, and now you're getting paid to do it. But it's something different every day. I've got to imagine. I hired someone to handle a lot of my social media, and she just absolutely loves it. She is just in love, and it's a challenge. Every day is a challenge. Like, how do we get the LinkedIn numbers up? How do we get the YouTube numbers up? Oh, this worked. And it's like just this fascinating, and I'm interested, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. And I'm trying to figure out why things work, but she absolutely loves it. And it's very interesting to, I don't know, to see happiness as a stat in a report. I thought that was just, I'm like, oh, that's so cute.
No, I mean, it is interesting because, I mean, a couple decades ago, it doesn't matter. What was the revenue? Like, what, it's like, well,
Right,
people are happy. Oh, that's a
yeah.
nice benefit, as opposed to it being a key measure of success. And I mean,
Mhm.
whether self-selecting into being in social is a key contributor of that, I do think you made a good point about the fact that it is so fast moving, right? So if you're the kind of person that doesn't like to sit still and likes a new challenge and likes innovation and likes that first mover experience, I mean, that's a great fit because
Mhm.
you can't you can't say, oh, well, I learned that. Now I'm going to be able to use that for the next 10 years.
Right,
That's
right.
out the window.
Absolutely. I think also you're the first one to know the meme. What's the next meme coming up? You can see all those trends happening. So you're the first of your crowd to know what's next. Yeah, it was very interesting that most people in social media marketing have come out of journalism, communications, media, or actual marketing in school, and they're the ones that seem to have the easiest time. So 52% of social media marketers, I thought this was interesting, come from media, journalism, communications, media, marketing. It said that they have the easiest time in social media. The ones that have the more difficult time come from financial services, STEM, things where I think there is more rules. Would that be a good way to say it? More rules, more structure? And people that come from journalism, media, there are less rules. It's more idea driven rather than rule driven. And so it seems to be that there's a personality, a flexibility of how you view things or what you're comfortable with that helps you be a little bit more adept at your work.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think definitely, being a science undergrad myself, you like the principles and the laws and, laws of physics are the laws of physics, although apparently quantum things are changing that. But the idea here is that I know what my universe is. I have boundaries. I have things that work. I have things that don't work. I have areas where we don't know what works, but at least I have these kind of buckets, as opposed to, in social media, it's so interesting because what worked yesterday may not be the thing that's going to work tomorrow. And I need to be open to that. And I need to say, and I think this is a key to, who actually likes it, but then who is actually successful is in this, is I not only need to know what I need to do and be open myself to this innovation and change, but I need to be able to influence others in my organization to be able to do that.
Yes.
Right? Because if you are working in social in this role, it's not just that you have to have the idea and you have to be able to know what to do. You have to be able to socialize that and actually get buy-in from these other types of thinkers in your organization, some of which may be a little more comfortable with less risk and more rules.
Yeah, and we'll get into that because there is definitely, that's part of the hardship of the role that was brought up. But I think you make a great point because I was reviewing someone's social media accounts the other day, and it was really interesting looking at their Instagram that, okay, here's a post with 5,000 likes and 20 comments. And then here's 2 likes, no comments. Then 6,000 likes and 40 comment. And I'm like, there is no sense to this. It's completely random to look through that. Whereas other accounts, I'll look through them and there's a consistency. There's 8,000, 9,000, 5,000, and there's variation. But this was just extreme swings. And as you said, there's no science here. This is there's no rules. It's completely, algorithm driven, but yet how many factors do we have to look at? And I think that's where that random style of personality or that open thinking, that there's no rule. There's how are you going to do this? How are you going to think through it and come up with a plan to figure it out? So it takes a personality to do that.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of when I have 2 boys, when my boys were infants, getting into that toddler stage. It's like just as soon as I thought I had it figured out, like we had a sleep schedule and I knew how they were doing, it's like all of a sudden next week would change, right? All of a sudden
Yes.
we're on a new thing. And now I'm like, oh, now I got to learn this all over again.
Kids are a great study. I always used to say, if something bothers you, just give it 2 weeks.
Mhm.
It'll
Exactly.
change. But this leads into the survey had 5 hardships, and I think these were all very related. 66% said they had too many responsibilities, and I think this is related to another that said almost 60% said that their bosses don't understand social media, getting to what you said about you got to sell your idea. And then 2/3 are working more than 40 hours in a week. And so then that leads to life work balance, compensation. But I thought a number of that, they're overworking, they're working more than a full-time schedule. They feel like they have too many responsibilities and bosses don't understand social media. That's all related. That
Mhm.
is all part of that job expectation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it goes back to what we were saying is that, you've got to not only have the good idea, be able to execute on it, but you have to help other people see that it's a good idea. And especially if you're working for or with stakeholders, managers, others in the organization that aren't as familiar with it, don't have the expertise in it, and potentially are even threatened or it's a hit to their own confidence that they don't feel like they can ask smart strategic questions about it. And
Mm.
depending on who you are, that can lead to being more defensive. It can lead to being more of a micromanager. It can, all of these other things. And so I think that's a big challenge for anyone who's working in an innovative area of marketing, social media included, where I don't just need to know my stuff. I need to actually be able to help others know this too, at least to break down those barriers, to break down those walls, so that they can be open to the ideas that have the open to the proposals or the innovations that I want to pursue.
Absolutely. But let's go a little deeper and let's go into the strategic, which you love, I know.
Mhm.
And that gets to the strategic level of the organization. Do they understand what they want to do with social media? And I think that leads to a lot of issues then with expectations, job roles, is when organizationally there's just this we need to do it drive, but we don't know how it fits. We don't know what to expect. And so without that strategic piece of how does this fit an organization, you're going to get too many responsibilities, too much to do, nobody understands. And that's where organizations tend to see these silver bullets as we just attach it to the business. There's no strategic integration of these tactics into the work.
Well, I mean, I think there's a common challenge highlighted, which is okay, I've got these social efforts, I've got all this energy, effort, revenue that I'm plowing into this content creation and the people creating the content. What's my return on investment, right? Where's my return?
Mhm.
How do I directly attribute this to revenue and sales? And I think it's tricky because, there's definitely now so many ways where you can directly attribute online activity, social activity to business results. But I also think you're making a really good point, which is that am I doing this with intention or am I doing this as a should? oh, my competition are, or everyone says I should, or the agency said I should? Or do we have an actual intention for this? Do we know how this fits into our audience journey, our buyer's journey, our consumer or customer's behavior? Do we understand whether or not this is just air cover to other, direct marketing initiatives we've got? Or is this actually a direct marketing initiative that's leading to a specific action and moving people through that journey so that they either know, do, understand, or believe something that's going to help them move to the next phase? And I think that's exactly the problem, is that different groups within organizations may even know it, but that cohesion, that connection of, we are literally doing this campaign on this platform at this time, and this connects to our bigger business goals, those profit, those share, those revenue goals that we have at the organizational level. It a lot of times isn't connected to any given campaign. And I think that can be a problem for really any kind of campaign, whether it's offline or online. But I do see it more often with those social media campaigns being disconnected.
Absolutely. And it even goes into other areas. In a previous podcast, I talked about all the shiny objects that have happened over the past 20 years. Big data, marketing automation, metaverse. We can go down the list of all these shiny objects that companies were like, oh, we've got to do this. But you can tell the ones that had a strategic view of how we're going to use it versus the ones who said, marketing automation, I want that. And then, oh, we have to automate what? And you're there saying, well, what's your marketing process? What's your framework? How do you communicate with people throughout their lives? Oh, I thought you would do that. That's automation, right? But you got to have something to automate. And we've seen this throughout. I think it even goes beyond digital. Digital just made it faster. But there's always been these sort of shiny objects that let's attach it to what we're doing. And not quite sure, but everyone says we're going to make money. Everyone says there's an ROI. We're just not quite sure how it's going to happen.
Well, that's why I'm so passionate about start with the problem first. Like what is the insight that you have into your audience that this will fix, right? Instead of saying, oh, great, awesome, I have this tool, like you said, I have this shiny object. Great, how do I use this? It's the same thing we used to fall into, product-based marketing versus audience-centric marketing, right? Great, I make this. Now go figure out who you can sell this to. Great, we now have this tool, we have this new shiny object, how do we use that? Let's just figure out how to shove it into our processes and organization. As opposed to saying, okay, well, what problems are we not solving right now that we didn't actually have a solution to address, or we had a solution, but it's not as good as this solution? And I think that's really the perspective I've seen, like you said, organizations who have taken these new innovations and actually leveraged it effectively to move their business forward, to grow their business, to increase revenue, to reach and improve their audience experience. They're using it to address something in that experience or their internal experience as an organization, as opposed to just saying, let's just figure out how we can install this.
Right. Oh, I love that. A problem-based approach that is so original, Mary. I love it. It is incredible. And I love how you just went there and brought that up, because that is just that simple self-assessment of what are we not doing well and where can we improve, and does this help us improve that? Hey, everyone, this is Matt, and thanks for listening. Just a quick break in the middle of the podcast here to let you know there's a couple ways that you can connect with us. The first is learn.sitelogic.com. That's the learning site where you can see courses on analytics, courses on digital marketing across paid search, SEO, multiple disciplines. And then also, you can connect with us on Slack. Go to Slack if you're there and look for us at endlesscoffeecup.slack.com. Connect with us. I'd love to hear from you. Hear what ails you in the realm of digital marketing. Are there courses you need, information that you'd like to hear, or maybe some past guests that you'd like to hear more from? Thanks again for being a listener of the Endless Coffee Cup, and I look forward to hearing from you. Yeah, I think we're seeing this now a little bit with AI, that I can see certain organizations, the ones who are saying, well, here's where we need to improve. Let's see if that way. And it's, for some it's working, for some, not so much. But I tend to see a little bit, I don't know, the whole AI thing is across the spectrum, but I am reading people who are solving problems first but it's that self-reflection, that self-assessment. What are we not doing well, and how do we make this work for us? I am happy to be seeing that in the AI conversation rather than just, you know, use it for everything. It's great.
No, 100%. I mean, if you have, I mean, I think honestly, one thing I love seeing people do is having not just like the bucket list of dream projects I wish I could do or dream things I want to accomplish, but almost like that running list of like the problems that I wish we could fix, or the improvements I wish we
Mm,
could make, or the optimizations I wish we could make. I just don't know how to make it now, or we don't have time or energy, effort, revenue, et cetera, to address it now. Because when something new like this comes, that's when you pull that sheet out and you're like, oh, actually, if our team could crank out content just 10% faster, that would allow us to XYZ. Right. So then
love
all of
it.
a sudden you have a place to plug in, right? Someone, instead of staring at the blank sheet and the blinking cursor and spending, an hour trying to get this blog post out, can now leverage a tool to at least get a starting point, even if they rewrite 100% of it, because
Yeah.
AI doesn't always sound like your brand voice, even if you train it. Sometimes there are things that you want a human to go back to. At
Mhm.
least they have a starting point. So even if that takes now, instead of an hour to complete, now it takes 45 minutes to complete, it takes 30 minutes to complete. Not only does that potentially, on a personal level, make someone more confident, more efficient, more excited about their job, not feeling so frustrated, you also are increasing the overall efficiency of the work itself. I mean, just on the point of that personal, I think that can sometimes be downplayed, right? It's like, how is this going to make us more sales? How is this going to get us more customers? How is this going to generate more leads? Obviously, we're in business. We're not here, just for the kick of it. This isn't a hobby. But at the
Mhm.
same time, going back to the report you're saying, that happiness, if someone's enjoying what they're doing, the work product will be better.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I love that, looking at that problem-based approach, keeping that list of where do we need to improve. That is such a great idea. But I think part of what happens is there's this, we can come back to management and their understanding of marketing and the place of marketing. I was talking to a marketing director a couple weeks ago, and they were telling me that, a couple years ago, if a product manager needed a video, we would coordinate with an agency. We would, create scripts, we, sketch it all out, and then the agency would take care of it. He says, today it's just kind of thrown at us that, hey, make a video for this. And they expect the team that this is our primary responsibility now, is making videos for social media. And, and he's just sitting there saying, this has, within a decade, my job, my team has, the responsibilities and expectations have changed dramatically because of this emphasis in social. And he says, I'm not sure, how do we handle this? It was just a very eye opening discussion. And he was being very honest about that.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I think growing up alongside of that, at least what I'm seeing is the the growth of this kind of fractional expert role, right?
Mm,
So at least you used to have like the internal marketing team, right? So you had the internal team, depending on the organization, sometimes you'd have product marketing versus brand marketing and those kind of divisions. But you'd have basically, like you're saying, the marketers, the agencies or the executors, the creative team, and maybe a couple advisors or consultants thrown in there. Whereas now, the more teams I'm working with actually are saying, oh, well, we have an agency external, but then we also have an internal agency. But then we also have, a fractional CMO in addition to our CMO, in addition to our VPs and directors. And so I think these fractional roles that are coming in as kind of almost these experts, whether it's a consultant or a fractional or whatever the term that individual chooses to use, I think it's coming in because of exactly that. These roles have changed so fast. I'm now being asked to be an expert in this area that I may not have had the time, energy, or experience to develop an expertise in. I don't even necessarily want to. But how do I get my job done? And I think having not necessarily a full-blown agency specialist, but someone that you can call on to kind of fill those gaps is something that I've seen a kind of grow up alongside that shift in that responsibility and what people are being asked to do as marketers.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a previous podcast too, we were talking about job listings and how it just turns into this amalgamation of, oh, we need this and oh, we need that. And oh, if they, if we could have a social media marketer who can edit video, it's, and I talk to my daughter's in that position right now. She's a photographer, but they keep like, oh, can you do some social? Can you do some video? Can you change this on the website? It's like all of a sudden she's expected. And she's like, I'm the photographer. I'm not even a social marketer. But because I know it, it's like all of a sudden that's just being thrown at me. So when I see this, 66% have too many responsibilities. I guess my first response is that's just 66%, because I think, especially within marketing, there's this, this, so you must know that. You're comfortable, we're still in that, you're comfortable with these computer things, so you must know how to fix it.
Yeah, I know. I think there was a quote there that I pulled out that I really liked in there from someone from Thinkific, and he was saying, there's a lot of overlap into other people's roles when you're in the social media space
Oh,
and the
yeah.
social media manager. And it's true, because even if the hub, right, to all of these different spokes, right, because customer service has to have something related to social, your sales team has to somehow be related to social to be able to pull out or identify potential hot leads, right? So you end up needing to also know enough to be dangerous in a lot of other different areas. And I think, to your point, like your daughter, if you're good at something, people are going to see that and they're going to take advantage of it. Even though you may be the photographer, oh, she's the creative one. Oh, she must be able to also do graphic design,
Exactly.
right? So you get pulled into these projects in all these different
Yeah.
ways.
In one of my trainings, I talk about the importance of interfaces, and that everyone's becoming much more impatient, and so you need to be spending much more time evaluating your interfaces and the usability of those interfaces. And I asked them, how many of you do tech support for your parents? And almost the entire, it's across age range, it's across everything. It's, yes, I do tech support for my parents. It's just funny to see, and it's a great bridge into that understanding of, why are you doing tech support for them? Because something's not understandable. It's not clear. It's difficult to understand. And your experience may help you through that. But obviously, whatever your parents are trying to do, it wasn't built with them in mind. And so and I'm trying to explain to them, it's not their fault. It's marketing, it's your fault. It's your job is that interface and the usability of it. So there's again that crossover in understanding, it's not just getting people there, it's we got to get them through the process or the task that we've set out before them. But so many times, I think, as marketing, we're, especially social media, it's all about the acquisition.
Mhm.
And past that acquisition, it's like, well, that's someone else's problem. That's
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
operations. That's we
But I
don't,
mean,
we don't
to
think
your
about
point, though, I
that.
mean, you're talking about the external audience, but even the internal audience of, oh, we're asking them to do these things. Am I enabling them to do their job? Like, what enablement have you given someone?
Mm,
Or is it more of a churn and burn attitude where it's like, oh, well, if they can't figure it out, got other people that can figure it out, right?
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Dangerous. Dangerous, because it doesn't take much of getting into conversion rate optimization to figure out you can turn around an entire organization by making a more accessible interface. That's, again, that's another thing there. But this leads to something, because I just talked about conversion rate optimization, talked about usability. Here was something in the report that that really jumped out to me, is that less than 30% of social media marketers advance into management. And that jumped out to me, and I have my own theories as to why that is low, because even though there's a lot of, I'll give you one, even though there's a lot of overlap, even though there's, as we were just saying, you're the creative one, I think when you are in social media marketing, it does lock you in to a very narrow pigeonhole of responsibility, because you are focused here. Whereas, and I don't know, Mary, if you saw the salary comparison, the SEO manager makes more money. The email marketing manager makes more money than a social media. The content marketing manager, digital marketing, most of the other disciplines are promoted more and make more. And my theory is that because social media is such a niche and focused area, it doesn't allow you to expand beyond that. See, like if you're an SEO, you're involved in content, you're involved in marketing, you're involved in website, you're involved in usability, you're involved in many areas of marketing. So you're much more visible in those. If you're in meetings, you're in more meetings if you're an SEO. Whereas if you're in social media, you're kind of kept, this is your role. And I think it's hard to step out of that.
I think that's probably valid because, it goes back to mentorship, right? So those who progress to management typically have mentors, have champions within the organization, are part of the planning for advancement, who is going to be, set up for success in different ways. And I think if you're, like you said, not involved or not even given exposure to or visibility into how what you do in social actually relates to bigger business strategy or other initiatives within the organization, the kind of things that you will have to think about if you're going to go into management.
Mhm.
I think missing those opportunities definitely probably contributes to the fact that that number's low compared to other groups. And, it's one of those things too, where I know some people think, oh, well, the social media role tends to be younger, right? It's a younger individual. And that may have been the case in the past few years, but it's not necessarily the case anymore.
No.
Right. So you could say, okay, it's a job for someone at the beginning of their career, therefore that's why the salary is lower. But, I've seen same ages working in SEO and social. So why the difference there? And, does age really matter, or is it really about contribution to the organization and success? So
Mhm.
it is interesting. I think what I also theorize, though, is that I'm wondering how much of it is, and I think it's probably both, but I also wonder how much of it is also self-selection, right? Because we said earlier that if it's true that this role tends to attract people who want the change and they want innovation and they want to be on the cutting edge and they want to be doing something different and solving those problems and, breaking the rules so that they can find some new path forward. We can all hold up certain leaders within businesses that are touted for having those skills. But I would say by and large, sometimes those skills don't always fit with the management because you're not on the front lines anymore all the time. You are expected to not just follow rules, but even set and enforce rules. So I'm wondering too, I guess I would theorize that there might be something there too about maybe it's a self-selection situation.
I like that. It's funny. I would have never brought this into this conversation, but I used to tell people there's doing what you love and then there's managing what you love.
Mhm.
And so many times I look back in my career where I absolutely loved the job, but as soon as I got promoted into management, I'm like, this stinks. The fun is gone because now I have to manage people. That was one of the best examples is when I was in the Army. As soon as I got those sergeant stripes, life stopped being fun. I'm like, I just want to go back to being a private and making trouble for
Yeah.
everybody else and not being the person who has to watch them and keep them out of trouble. There is something to, yeah, I love doing it, but managing it is a completely different thing. I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's that great. The other way I was going to go as well, and you alluded to this earlier, is the perception of value to the organization. I think, SEO, you can tie more financial impact to the work, to the result. Let's go beyond. Any other department is financially driven.
Mhm.
Marketing, however, is kind of alone in that it's somewhat financially driven. We can look at ROI, but it depends on what kind of organization you are. It depends on how easily you can track all of that. If you have multiple products and multiple things and distributors, retailers, it's going to be hard, but you're making an impact. It may not be as measurable as you'd like. And then you get into the different areas of marketing. And some have, like you said, there's a little more direct, not completely, but if an organization understands I can measure 40% of what SEO does, but I'm going to look at that 40%. I think social is a moving target. And when people don't understand the purpose of it, I've had to go to organizations to say, you got to look at this as PR.
Mhm.
That's it. It's PR to get a direct ROI off social. is going to be near impossible because of you and your situation.
Yeah,
And
I mean, especially I think in the organic vein. I mean, I know it's slightly more easy to do your funnel math when you've got paid ad campaigns and
right.
it's a direct call to action, right? But if you're thinking about more kind of like brand equity level and kind of air cover level, I think you're right on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah,
I
the
mean,
paid
I'm on
campaign,
board.
yeah,
You've
gets the
sold me.
one-to-one. Well, and that's the thing. I say it all the time, and you allude to it too. Likes doesn't make any CEO happy. I mean, you bring likes or engagement into a meeting, nobody cares. And I think that gets to where social marketers have to learn that measurement language. They have to learn that where's the impact that I'm making. And if they can't, to your point, if they can't verbalize it, if they can't promote it, if they can't communicate it within the organization,
Mhm.
that's going to restrict their career prospect. It's going to restrict their growth and their value in the organization.
That's why I'm so interested when I work with teams. We have to connect what is going on in this campaign to that big number, right? At the big number, beginning of this year, we know we had to hit this percent, growth or this revenue number. Great. What piece of that are we driving with this? Because if we don't know that, it makes it very hard for us to, like you said, influence and sell
Mhm.
at the C-suite or the management level, because
Yeah.
that's what they're gold on, right? They're not gold on
Yes.
how well this this one social campaign goes. This is just one piece of the puzzle that they care about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and that I think, that's why I'm so focused on, there's so many soft skills.
Yeah.
And so much of the time, I think there was a role delineation study that even in social media, like more than 30% of the time is spent communicating. And so learning to communicate not just your strategy, but the results, communicating the data, the analytics, but communicating in a way that shows your innovation, that shows your insights. What have you learned and what now is the impact of that learning? So that there is an entire communications process to learn that enables you to now evangelize what you're doing within the organization and raise your profile doing that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I know that's one of your specialty areas is helping people tell better stories with their data, being able to say, okay, well, graphs are great, but really? So, I mean, I've seen the same too. I do a lot of brand storytelling where you're talking to an external audience training, but more and more, I'm starting to also get a lot of requests for people saying, well, but how do we communicate better internally, right? I can't, and it all connects, right? If we're not communicating internally, we're not going to effectively be able to put something together that's going to have an impact in the market. I think anyone who's undercrediting the ability for their team to improve internal efficiency and effective communication might find themselves behind the eight ball in a few years. So.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think communication is by far going to be one of the most valuable skills moving forward. And we're seeing it now that there is a demand, there's a need for effective communication. And for some reason, it's just not being met. And I just did something the other day. If it's ChatGPT, you'll put in a pretty good set of instructions. But if you're sending an email to a coworker, you don't do the same. You should, but you don't. You're expecting more from a machine than a human with less. You're not giving the human the fair shake. You're not giving them the instructions. I think that leads to one of the final stats that really jumped out at me. I don't know if you saw this, that 24% of social media marketers plan to leave the field in the next year. That's huge. That a quarter of social media marketers plan to leave the industry. Not just switch jobs, they're planning on just getting out. And I'm wondering how much communication has to play in that. That even though they're happy, there's other things going on that I think are it's affecting, if that's a bad retention rate. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I mean, and it does kind of bump up against that happiness stat though, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Because if they're happy in what they do, it leads me to ask the question, but do they feel appreciated?
Yeah.
Right? Are they
Right.
recognized? And that is what could contribute to the idea of, well, I like what I'm doing, but I'm not getting rewarded. Like you said, the pay is lower. I'm having to fight harder for my ideas, right? I have to work harder to even get buy-in or get budget or get approvals. I think those all, I would guess, directly contribute to that, because it's not just about being happy in what you're doing, but you also have to be appreciated.
Yeah. Oh, that's big. That is big. Yeah. And if you don't feel it's there, it's interesting. Another stat, actually, from another study and from actually, one of my previous guests, she would say, you know where they're going? They're going into business for themselves. They're going to leave and start their own thing. That if I'm going to work this hard, I'm going to do it for myself because that'll be more rewarding. And I think she might be onto something, that if you're a social media manager and you are learning all of this, why am I going to do it here where I'm not appreciated? As LeBron said, I'm taking my talents to Miami.
Well, I think she's right on, though, because I think that's kind of where I was going with the whole, is it self-selection? Are they opting out themselves? Because if I am not being involved in certain conversations, if I'm not finding mentors or champions within my organization that are able to help me get to the next level within my organization, and you're seeing that these skills are so highly prized, that there are so many people who don't know how to do this and aren't as comfortable with the constant shifting landscape, then yeah, doing it as a consultant can be a little bit more lucrative.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mary, this has been a fun conversation. Is there anything out of the report that you picked up that you want to throw out here?
Yeah, for me, I think just the overall theme of the fact that there was excitement for what they're doing, right? Which is, I see this definitely here, but I see this in other areas too. But like, I love what I do and I'm excited about what I do, but I'm feeling unfulfilled. Like, I'm feeling this lack of buy-in, a lack of support. And I think for me, just the key takeaway overall was just seeing that, wow, there's like a talent exodus happening here. These are people who can
Wow.
contribute something to the organization in a way that complements other skill sets of the organization, but we're not taking advantage of it. We're not recognizing it. We're not pulling it in the right way. Going back to the kid example, right? You've got kids that don't necessarily learn by sitting at a desk and writing and reading. You've got kids that need to touch things and play with things and move their bodies and experience it. And they'll still learn the same lesson, but they might need to do it in a different way. And I think that's one thing that I think the organizations that are doing this well are starting to realize, is that potentially this role and the people who are attracted to this kind of role need maybe a different career path, and maybe the career path looks slightly different in the future.
That's really cool. I like that. Yeah, it's very interesting. There is an upside. There is a thread of happiness and joy in the work. Yes, there's frustration. Yes, leaving the industry, that kills me though. But yet at the same time, I think there was one that like almost 50% say their mental health is affected. And that could be but yet it doesn't seem to affect the joy in the work that there is. And I like how you pulled that out, that there is a special group of people who absolutely enjoy doing this. And now, how do we make the most out of that? And I think a lot of that's going to fall on management. Those people that are in those areas, that how do we better utilize the talents?
Mm-hmm.
How do we make a doable workload? And how do we create clarity and expectations? I think those are key areas of how to retain and grow and get the most out of your social media teams.
100%. Interesting.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well,
Mary,
I appreciate it. So, this is the kind of stuff I love thinking about. So thank you, Matt.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. This has been a great conversation. It's been great to connect with you again and talk more. And Mary, as always, if people are interested to learn more about what you do and how you do it, how can they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Best way is just myname.com. So maryzarnecki.com. I'm sure you'll help them with the spelling with the show notes, but that's the one size fits all to find me and find out what social platforms you can connect with me on. I'm always on Instagram and LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And like we said, Mary does training as well. So lots of stuff organizationally. I highly recommend Mary if you want to talk more about that. Go see what she does, how she helps people. Mary, this has been such a great conversation. Great catching up with you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Matt. Really enjoyed the conversation and hopefully do it again.
We will. Absolutely. We've done it before and we will continue. So thank you, dear listener, for listening in. Looks like I'm at the bottom of my coffee cup. Hopefully you've been able to get through a couple of cups as well. But I look forward to our next conversation on the Endless Coffee Cup podcast. You've been listening to the Endless Coffee Cup. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with somebody else. And of course, please take just a moment and rate or review us at your favorite podcast service. If you need more information, contact me at sitelogicmarketing.com. Thanks again for being such a great listener.